Welcome back to the EdgeVerse Techcast and day 3 of CRA week. And again, I'm Kyle Dando.
And I'm Bridgette Stone. So far this week, we've covered risk assessment in step 1 and security by design in step 2.
And so today we're going to tackle the step that many manufacturers find the most intimidating. And you know what that is? That's proving compliance.
Because building a secure product is only part of the story, under CRA, you also need to demonstrate clearly and credibly that your product meets the requirements.
And joining us today is our friend Carlos Serratos, who joined us on our prior episode. We already introduced you before. You're one of NXP's experts. Your job is to help manufacturers navigate this complex CRA compliance. So Carlos, welcome back.
Thank you. Happy to be back here. I am a member of the team at NXP that tackles the CRA inquiries and also direct the internal development to resolve requirements in hardware and software.
Excellent. Well, the first 2 episodes, Carlos, have been really great. You've lined up some great speakers. So today, are you ready to meet the challenge?
Okay, I'm ready here. Thank you.
All right, so we've covered 2 aspects of CRA. We've talked about this risk assessment and security by design. Still, all this boils down to the most important element, how to demonstrate compliance with the CRA. Carlos, what is the relation between those elements with regards of the goal and achieving the conformance as a goal in itself?
That's a good question, Bridgette. In today's world, safety is given. The vast majority of products, if not all, address safety, from safe electromagnetic emissions, dangerous chemicals in the product, voltage levels, etc. And users and industry expect security to reach the same levels of by design and by default as it is the case on safety.
Yeah, that's a really great way to frame it. Safety regulations are already well understood, and now CRA brings the same structure to cybersecurity.
Indeed, the CRA comes to fill a gap in the regulatory stack. The manufacturers need to demonstrate they address the security of their products by implementing the adequate contrameasures during the lifetime of the product. And that needs to be in proportion to the risk. They need to be transparent with regards of the intended use of the product, the support period, residual risk, and the activities from the user to mitigate the risk. And that's what it means to be CRA compliant.
So it's not just about building securely, it's about clearly communicating how the product should be used and supported securely.
Perhaps the most important element of the compliance exercise is the risk assessment, because this defines the technical and procedural activities that manufacturers need to implement for their specific use case.
This connects directly back to step 1 of our series. Risk assessment isn't theoretical. It drives real engineering and compliance decisions.
Exactly. And there are questions like, do I need a tamper-resistant component? Can I use an MCU without security functionality and be in compliance? Is this architecture implementation suitable for the CRA conformance? And the answer to all those questions is the risk assessment. However, as important as it is, the risk assessment is not enough. The principle of security by design, as addressing the security in early phases of the product development, that's also equally important. And consider that it's not enough to bring to market a product without security issues. The product needs to continue being secure during its lifetime. And that's why security by design is so important.
Perfect. All right, Carlos. Well, in the past, you've shared a lot of your hobbies. You definitely are busy, and they seem to be very fun. But one of your hobbies you mentioned is baking. There's no pressure, and I know Bridgette and I would love to test some things that you create in the kitchen. But in the context of CRA, what would be your analogy as a recipe for achieving CRA compliance?
Okay. First, about the cake, that's a promise. Of course, if we meet in the middle war, I will be happy to present you with my signature chocolate cake. But back to the CRA recipe. You will need the ingredients, the instructions on how to mix the ingredients, the time and temperature of the oven. Of course, you need the oven to bake the cake.
Of course. Hey, I like where this is going. Let's walk through some more of those ingredients.
Okay, let's start with what we need for baking the CRA conformance. As the ingredients are, first of all, a risk assessment. You also need a vulnerability management policy. You need to implement a security development process. You need to have a clear support period policy. You need to provide information about the intended use, residual risk, and mitigations to the user. You need to identify the product class that applies to your particular product. You need to carry the conformity assessment according to the class. as well the support of the technical documentation validating your conformance claims. You will need also a declaration of conformity or DOC, as this is the official part of the exercise. And finally, you need to apply a visible CE mark in your product.
Well, that's a pretty comprehensive list of ingredients. So I think I could maybe even bake that CRA cake. What you did is you showed that compliance spans both engineering and organizational processes. You showed that it's not just the technical implementation, but sometimes it involves providing documentation, lifecycle, and accountability.
Exactly. And now what comes after the ingredients is the instructions for baking this cake. The very first step is to perform the risk analysis. The manufacturer needs to identify the risk, need to select the applicable technical and procedural countermeasures for mitigating the risk, and select the adequate components for demonstrating state of the art. They need to integrate the components according to the guidance from the suppliers, following a secure development process. Step 2 is to make a conformance analysis with the CRA essential cybersecurity requirements, identifying those applicable to the product, with evidence on how the requirement is addressed by the product itself or the components. And when the requirement is not applicable, they need to provide rationale for that. The next step will be to verify the CRA conformance following the applicable conformance mechanism and standards according to the product class. On the fourth step, we have to collect all the evidence from above, including the technical documentation, and draft the declaration of conformity. Step number 5 is to make sure that the support period and vulnerability management policy have been included in the risk assessment and added to the user information along with the residual risk of the product and mitigation measures that need to be addressed by the user of the product. And finally, the CE mark needs to be added, and we need to keep the documentation for 10 years after placing the product on the market. And that's it. That's your CRA cake. With that, bon appetit.
Oh, well, that doesn't sound quite as delicious as a chocolate cake, but it doesn't sound that complex either. Perhaps it takes a bit of time. You might try a couple of times before you get it right, but it's definitely doable for our manufacturers.
I should add a big disclaimer here. I'm no lawyer, and you may need to talk to your legal advisor to make sure that you cover the entire manufacturer's obligations. But you're right, Kyle. The exact point that I'm trying to bring across is that the CRA is not new in terms of addressing security. Manufacturers utilizing other frameworks like the IEC 62443 already perform a lot of those activities. Developing the right process and documentation may take some time, and we can only encourage our audience to start working on CRA compliance since December 11, 2027 is just one day closer.
Yes, it is. Carlos, you make it easy to the point that I might even try the recipe, and I'm not a very good cook. With that being said, how can NXP help me? What tools and ingredients are available on our side for addressing CRA conformance?
We have several resources available in our CRA landing webpage. For example, we describe the security processes followed by NXP that help manufacturers to understand the NXP posture towards security, like a full description of our security development process and third-party certifications. We also have application notes for the IMX93, the MCX, and secure element products that can help manufacturers to map the applicability of the CRA essential requirements, supporting the risk assessment and conformance claims. We also provide a full description of our vulnerability management policy, explaining how vulnerabilities are treated by NXP. And there is more to come, so stay tuned for more.
I cannot wait to see what's in store and all the interesting conversations that will happen at Embedded World.
Oh, and again, that cake that you promised, I intend to enjoy that while I learn more about CRA compliance. All right, well, Carlos, this has been incredibly helpful. You took something that I didn't quite understand at the beginning and turned it into an easy recipe for me to understand.
Yes, and more importantly, you showed that CRA compliance isn't about reinventing everything. It's about bringing together risk assessment, secure design, and documentation into one structured process.
And now I can't even stop thinking about that delicious chocolate cake.
You see, you are welcome anytime.
Careful, that invitation is now on record with our security experts.
All right, Carlos, thanks for having fun with us and joining us to help the listeners understand how to prove compliance for CRA and for officially making CRA the most delicious regulation that we've ever discussed on this TechCast.
Thank you to both of you for the invitation. It was my pleasure.
All right, tomorrow we complete CRA week with step 4, maintaining conformity throughout the product lifecycle.
I'm looking forward to it, Bridgette, but for everyone else, keep innovating, keep documenting your CRA, and we'll catch you on the next EdgeVerse Techcast tomorrow.